Out here in the perimeter, there are no stars. Out here, we is stoned, immaculate.
Hello and welcome. This is the C86 show. I'm David Eastaugh. As you know, we love a special guest. This week it's going to be the turn of the Vibrators, because I recently spoke to their drummer, John Eddie Edwards, to find out more about life, love, poetry, and all that other groovy stuff. Anyway, the most exciting news, and there's quite a lot, they've got a new album coming out this year, plus RAK Records has repackaged 5 CDs, which is the albums between 1985 to 1990, including Recharged, Meltdown, Vicious Circle and Volume 10, plus a live record as well, lots of bonus tracks and a beautiful booklet. What more do you want? Anyway, this is the interview, so after several minutes of casual chat, we got down to that very exciting subject that was the early formative years. Eddie, take it away.
Yeah, probably the thing for me that changed everything. I remember vividly in the 50s, I was born in 51, I remember vividly in the 50s Elvis Presley and the radical change that happened. And then, of course, after that, it was in England that we had Lonnie Donegan. I mean, the first record I ever bought was Lonnie Donegan. My Old Man's a Dustman. I liked all that skiffle thing.
Yes,
the one really big change I had was when I heard the Kinks. You really got me. That was it. From then on, it was wow.
It was music.
That Kinks were one of the big bands. But I mean, if you play "You Really Got Me Today," it still sounds astoundingly raw and exciting. You know.
Yes. It's interesting. I did an interview with the guy who produced that a couple of weeks ago. He's still alive.
Oh, Shel Talmy.
Yes, that's the man. Yeah. He was really happy about everything until I had spoke about the manager of The Who, and then he let fire on some things that I thought, he hasn't forgot. He hasn't forgot why he disliked the the manager. Was he?
Yeah, I can't remember their names. They had 2 guys managing, didn't they?
Yeah, Kit Lambert was the one.
Kit Lambert, that's it. Yeah.
Yeah, he didn't hold back on what he thought of Kit Lambert at all, which was quite interesting. And that was the end of his relationship with The Who. So there you go. But he went.
Produced the first couple of singles by The Who, didn't he? I think.
Yes.
Anyway.
That's right. And then he did a few very early stuff with David Bowie, but his stuff in the 60s was amazing. It's just extraordinary. So, he was quite the man for a minute. And it was kind of interesting because he was from America and he just came over as a young kid to the UK and suddenly found himself doing, the Kinks, The Who. And I think also he might have worked with people like Jimmy Page as well at a stage. So
Jimmy Page played on purportedly. I mean, they always said Jimmy Page always said he just played a tambourine on the Kinks, but he was at those sessions, so I imagine that he played some rhythm guitar or something. I don't know.
Yes, him and Jeff.
We shall never know, because a good session man never admits to his sessions.
Yeah, I know. It's always tricky. So were your parents at all kind of a music? Did they have any musical sort of interest?
Not really. No, I mean, my father liked things like Bing Crosby. You know, I mean, he was born in 1915, so he liked things like Bing Crosby and that kind of crooner stuff. You know, American artists. I can't think of the other guy that used to be popular. His daughter does singing now.
Yes, well, there was Bing Crosby was one of the early ones, but my dad used to like people like Kay Starr and Teresa Brewer, and then various country artists as well. Oh yeah, a bit later. They
were in the country and stuff. I think the thing for me probably was I have an older brother. He's 10 years older than me, and so when when Elvis Presley came around in 56, 57, he was 15, 16 years old. So he was right into all of that and buying all those kind of rock and roll things, like Johnny and the Hurricanes and those kind of records in the 50s. So I got used to hearing those.
Yes.
I can remember the day we first got our, the record player, the dance set record player that played 45s, and so you didn't have to get them on 78s on a wind-up gramophone anymore.
Yes, I know, that's quite weird, because I think my parents are probably not that much younger, but I think when they got married in the 50s, they sold everything, and they only brought a record player back into the house in the 70s when they got a bit of money together, being kind of that working class background that I don't think no one ever borrowed money, and that was just not seen as something you did. So I think...
Yeah, at the worst, you bought things on tick,
Yes, but they tried to avoid it because that was the way that it would all go terribly wrong. But then, it was interesting because David Bowie and Lemmy, two of my kind of heroes, I suppose, if one has them. I mean, when they were ever asked about their musical influences, they both said in separate places, Little Richard, it was kind of seeing Little Richard that kind of blew their minds.
Yeah, Richard, I love his stuff. His records are fantastic.
And that was
Little
the one.
Richard, Chuck Berry, all that 50s, Eddie Cochran, Buddy Holly. I mean, over the years we've done a couple of covers of Buddy Holly stuff, and all those English rock and rollers like Johnny Kidd and the Pirates and things. Fantastic.
Yes. So when the 60s come trundling along, and as there's a poem, I think, by Philip Larkin who mentions that the 60s start in 63 with the first Beatles album and Lady Chatterley's Lover. I mean, you were at that age where you must have started to sort of sense and see things drastically happening from your Lonnie Donegan and Skiffle period and,
Yeah, well, I mean, I think at that point the music was coming from America. And British artists like, Cliff Richards was he was like a little bit of a pale imitation of Elvis and things, and there weren't, any really, Billy Fury was very good, but there weren't any really great British artists, and then suddenly it all sort of swung round with the Beatles and the Kinks and the Yardbirds and the Rolling Stones and the Who and the Small Faces, and all those bands were taking it back to America and and playing it better and with more energy and more enthusiasm and more had better melodies and better songs and better ideas and everything, and it all got sold as a British invasion of America. That's what happened, and it was really exciting to be in it.
Yes,
especially in the 60s when they had they had all the pirate radio stations, like Caroline and London, and they would play all that music which you couldn't hear except on Radio Luxembourg, which was really crackly, fading in and out radio station because they were broadcasting it from Luxembourg.
Yes. And did things like the John Pill's Perfume Garden, did that sort of come into your kind of...
Yeah, I used to listen more to Radio Caroline where I was a kid rather than Radio London. I think John Peel was on Radio London. I used to listen to Kenny and Cash and all that kind of stuff, and Johnny Walker. There was a Scottish DJ that used to be on Luxembourg that I used to like, but I can't remember his name. But that's what I was getting into, And then of course they started to play, the Beatles and all those bands started to be on the Saturday Club with what was his name? The DJ that used to run Saturday Club on Radio 1. Or it was the light program then days, and we used to listen to that going to football on a Saturday morning when you were going to play football on a Saturday morning for the school and that. Yes,
God, we loved our football. Did you? So when did a sort of the drum kit kind of appear into your sort of life? I mean, when did?
Well, I was always into the Cubs and the Scouts when I was a kid. I joined the Cubs when my parents used to run it. They sort of took it over because the previous leaders were. It was a big news story at the time. I think it was in 1958 or 59, I think it was. And they were murdered. The scout leader was murdered, and the cub leader was shot through the spine and paralysed. And my parents sort of didn't want the scouts and the cubs to pack in, so they took it over.
Yes.
And they always had a band. They had a marching band. And so from the age of about 8, you kind of think, I want to be in the band and march down the street playing the drums and the bugle and all that,
Yes.
Sort of thing with that kid. My brother, like I said, was 10 years older than me, so he was playing the drums and marching, and I was walking at the back. So as soon as I got to about 10, I thought, right, I want to learn the drums. So that was the first drums that I ever played, was only in marching bands.
Yes.
And after that, I used to roadie for bands and do discos and DJing and stuff like that, and then I actually bought my first pucker drum kit the day before the first Vibrators gig.
Blimey!
I bought it on the Wednesday, and we played on the Thursday, I think.
That's amazing. I mean, was this all in London, by the way?
Oh yeah. I lived in Edgware. I lived in North London in Edgware.
Yes, because I was.
Other guys lived around.
I did have a little time in the Cub Scouts doing my bits and pieces there. I must admit, it's quite... I was a little bit shocked when you mentioned that the two of the people had been murdered. I mean, that didn't sort of happen much in the wonderful world that was rural
No,
Suffolk?
it didn't. It was a big thing. They were on holiday in Austria.
Oh, right.
They were climbing up the mountains in Austria, and then some guy shot them and robbed them, I guess. I can't remember exactly.
Yes.
And it was a massive news story at the time in England, because people didn't get murdered much in those days. And then there was a scandal that he was the scout leader was, on holiday with the cub leader, and they were sharing a room and all that. And then they looked into it, and of course they had separate rooms, and everything was in perfect innocence. And but of course, because my parents had taken over, that we got involved in the story, and they had the newspapers come around to do interviews and find out what happened.
Yes. Well, when you're young, can anybody dying always seems strange, but murder is that's
in all my life, I think that's the only person I can ever think of that was murdered.
Yeah, it is kind of strange, especially that close. I mean, during that sort of period, because you said sort of 51, so during that sort of like the Summer of Love, 67, you would have been a perfect age. And in London, there was things like, the International Times, there was Indica Books and Gallery, there was all those kind of performance art stuff going on with Yoko Ono. I mean, there was also in the Ali Pali, in July of 1967 was the 14-hour Technicolor Dream. Were you kind of aware of that kind of, the psychedelic peace, love and hugging people?
Yeah, the mate of mine who lived up the road, who became our manager, Dave Werner, was a few years older than me, so he could go to those things. I was just a shade too young. Knox used to go to that. I mean, Knox saw Jimi Hendrix at Manor House in London, a pub in Manor House, North London, and stuff like that. He saw the Beatles and things, and I was just a little bit too young to go to those things. But I saw Hendrix first in '69, and from about '68 onwards, that's all I did was go to gigs. Go and see bands all over London. You just go and see whoever was playing. So you saw a lot of these massive acts when they were playing to 200 people in colleges and things.
Yes, this is true.
I saw David Bowie when he first did that whole Spiders from Mars thing in a college in Regent Street, I think it was, in London. And was it Regent Street Polytechnic? Yeah, in a hall that held probably no more than about 150, 200 people.
Yes, and had he sort of made the change from his folky...
it was full on Iggy Stardust and the Spiders from Mars playing all of those kind of songs.
Yes.
The Hunky Dory album. It was when the Hunky Dory album came out.
Right, my God. So when you were just at that age where you thought, this is it, I'm sort of probably left... Did you leave school at 16?
No, I stayed on. I did 3 years in the sixth form because I didn't do very well in my exams, so I was out doing gigs and rotating for bands and going to see bands and stuff, and playing football and cricket and all that kind of stuff. So the schoolwork got put on the back burner a little bit, and then I went to North East London Polytechnic in Goodmays. I lived in Goodmays and Ilford, and the college was in Barking, but it was a big college, and they used to have a lot of bands on in the colleges in those days, in the Barking precinct and in Walthamstow. They had bands, massive bands that, like the Faces, the Kinks, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, all kinds of people that, like that. So you'd be going out, and they had the Roundhouse in Barking as well. You used to go down there a lot and see bands.
Right.
Velvet Underground and all those kind of people there.
Just casually going. I know, it's amazing. I have seen some of those kind of colleges, in Norwich, where, during the 70s, that period, the early 70s, they'd obviously had an entertainment ents officer who just went, we'll book this band and this band. And you look and you think, oh my God, they become such famous names, and you think, it was almost a bit casually done.
When I was at North East London Polytechnic, I wasn't on the social secretary, but I was more into music, knew more about it than the others, and they would sort of say, what about this band and what about that band? Should we book them? I remember they said, should we get this band, Slade? And we had the Slade Alive album in the house I was living in with my mates. One of the other guys had bought it, and we played it all the time. And I said, put them on there, actually, brilliant live, and it'll be a great gig. And they had it in one of the small halls, so they didn't want to risk it in the big hall that held 1,000 people. And then they played like 6 or 8 months later or whatever it was. And, of course, by then they'd have about 3 number-1 singles. And so they were thinking, they won't turn up, they won't play. But they turned up, and it was, absolutely they were sensational.
Yes.
Not the old, it was just a brilliant frontman. It was such in-your-face rock and roll. You thought, this is what we got to do.
Yeah, I think especially in those days, so many bands played so many gigs live, from the Beatles. They had that apprenticeship in Hamburg, didn't they? And a lot of bands, played a lot. And recently I did an interview with the guitarist with Twisted Sister, who'd been going 10 years before they got a record label from this sort of like 71 to 70 to 81. Yeah. And would play once, twice a night for, he counted up, ridiculous amount of gigs they'd play because they had to try and earn money because that was their only job. But, it would have been thousands of gigs before they made that first album. And, he just said that, unless you get that those kind of numbers under your belt, you kind of don't, you're not quite with it. I mean, that's a bit of a sweeping statement.
I was talking to someone the other day, and when Adele pulled out of those shows in Las Vegas, and I think the problem with her is she sort of went down the modern route of going online, selling a lot of records, and so she never kind of worked her way up through the various grades of club. And, it's nerve-wracking enough going out and playing in front of 50 of your mates on a Wednesday night in a college or in a little bar or something. And she went pretty much from doing that to playing, sort of 60 shows in Las Vegas residency. So it must have been terrifying,
Yes. I know, it's quite a leap, isn't it?
I mean, Knox had done those gigs. He'd been playing for He'd been playing for about, when we started with the Vibrators, he was about 30, and he'd been playing since he was 14. So he'd done hundreds of gigs, and John and Pat had done a lot. But like I say, I bought my first drum kit the day before our first gig, so I hadn't done any.
But luckily, you could.
I was crapping myself thinking, how the hell am I in this band with these guys?
Yes.
But as far as I was concerned, Pat was the best bass player in North London. John was the best guitar player, and Knox was the best frontman and songwriter. And I'm thinking, how have I managed to talk my way into doing this?
Yes, that's quite an apprenticeship, wasn't it? Did you during that early period of the 70s, where were you sort of going musically? Because there was obviously at that stage, like the birth of heavy metal with people like Black Sabbath and Deep Purple, and then you had the prog world, and then you had this folk world, and it was kind of exploding everywhere. And then you had people like the Doctors and Madness and Dr. Feelgood. I mean, being young and going to lots of gigs must have been a high time. But where was your heart slightly heading towards?
Well, in the early 70s, the band that I was most into was probably the Faces. I used to go and see them a lot. I saw them about 38 times, I think I worked it out once. And Humble Pie and those kind of, in-your-face rock and roll bands, and the Who, and again the Kinks and stuff. Because even there, in those days, the Who was still only playing, big theatres like the Albert Hall and stuff. So you could go and see the Who, and certainly the Faces were doing the college circuit, so you could go and see them, or the Marquee, so you could go and see them all the time.
Yes, I think John Peel said
one of the bands that I was most into at that time. I'd sort of toyed with the prog rock thing, but I got a bit bored with it. I like the rock and roll stuff a lot better myself.
Yes, I do remember John Peel saying one of his best nights was when I think Sunderland had won the FA Cup against Leeds, and the Faces were playing Sunderland, I think, and he went to see them, and he said it was just the most amazing atmosphere that night. So I think I got that story.
It was brilliant fun. It was just you felt like they were part of you, and you were part of them, and I think that's a really important thing to try and get in. I mean, I saw them so many times. I remember standing down the front, and Ronnie Wood came on stage, and he looked down, and he recognised me and waved hello, and I thought, I was wow, look at that. It was an exciting moment,
Well, absolutely, my God, I know that those moments can mean so much. I know.
But I met them, Rod and Ronnie, when they were playing with Jeff Beck, and they were playing at Mill Hill Public School when I was a kid, and you couldn't get into the school end-of-term dance unless you're a member of the school. But, of course, we wanted to all go and see the Jeff Beck group, and so we kind of smuggled ourselves in, and then we got recognised as not being members of the school and slung out. And so we went round the back and saw all the guys in the dressing room, and then they opened the window and let us climb in. Sneaked back into the hall, and we got slung out again, and we missed them. They said, oh, well, next time, come down and see us down the Speakeasy. We're playing down there later on at 2 o'clock. And you thought, oh, yeah, we were about 16, you know. It was odd enough to get up to the public school, let alone to go to the speakeasy.
God, that would have been amazing, though. Jeff Beck, blimey. I think I can remember one of those stories. I think when, I don't know, because I don't know if it was when they were, you know, Ronnie and Rod were supporting, but they didn't get any money or food, so they were going to go around trash cans. I think this was when they were in America, and they just would. They were playing all these shows. They were still completely hungry and poor, so they were still sort of rummaging in the sort of a bit like Top Cat, really, wasn't it? So I think that's one of the reasons they gave up one of their bands. I think that was the Jeff Beck band, but I might be wrong. Sorry, Jeff, if that was.
Yeah, I think the Jeff Beck band were just about to break through, and then they split up, and then, you know, Jimmy Page stole the idea and did all the Yardbird stuff and put together the Zeppelin album, and then suddenly they sold billions of records.
Yes. Did you see Terry Reid at that stage? Because he was going to be...
Oh, yes. What a singer. God, I absolutely loved Terry Reid. I used to go and see him every chance we got at that time. I've got about 6 of his albums, yeah.
Oh,
the
God.
second one, Super Lungs one. What an album. Oh.
Yes. I do like River. I think it's called River.
Yes. Oh, brilliant album. I love it, yeah.
It's got a really American... I think it was produced by an American guy, and it got a track called Dean on it, which I just remember thinking is amazing. But it's kind of... It's a bit more... I think he's probably had a bit more smoking, but it's got a nice vibe, and it's got some amazing songs on it, so you can't knock him. But he's... amazing. I've always remembered that there was a clip of him playing at the first Glastonbury Festival, which was just stunning. So, it's amazing.
Yeah, I always, when people say who was your favourite ever vocalist, I always say Terry Reid, and they say who? If you saw him live, it was just breathtaking. His version of "Stay With Me, Baby" on that album is just outstanding.
Yeah, I know. I can't remember the woman who guests on that Glastonbury video where he plays, and it's just she's an amazing vocalist, and that people knew how to sing in those days, didn't they? But yeah, he's stunning actually, and just an amazing singer and songwriter. So then. I know, good old Terry. He's still with us, actually. He's still doing...
Yeah, I've heard he was being interviewed on Johnny Walker's show a few weeks back or months back.
Yes, there you go. So how did your band then develop? You know, it sounds like you were the person who was invited in more than the person who initiated it.
What it was is I was trying to learn bass and getting absolutely nowhere with it, and I said to John, you know, if we got a band together, then I could learn as we were going along, and you could show me what to play, and I could do that. And he said, no, that's daft. Why don't we get Pat, because he's a really good a bass player, and get back playing bass, and you play the drums, because you know, I used to, when we set up and roaded for other bands like Bazooka Joe and stuff, we used to set the drums up, and then we'd bash away for half an hour until the band turned up. And he said, you can play the drums a bit, you know, you play the drums, and then Knox was out of a band at that time. I said, well, Knox is free, let's get Knox in as well. So we phoned up Knox, and then we went round to see him on a Sunday morning, sat in a pub, and we said, yeah, let's do it. And I had the back line of a band I was roading for in the van at the time, so we went round my parents' house, set up in the garage out in the garden, bashed through for a couple of hours. Police came round and told us to shut up because the neighbours were all complaining. And we thought, we got something here. And then 2 weeks later, we did our first gig.
Blimey, that was...
So for the first couple of rehearsals we had, I had to borrow the drum kit from this other band, so I didn't actually own one.
Yes, and interesting enough, you sort of, supported at the 100 Club dear old Chris Spedding, didn't you, in 76, which was at the time...
Yeah, the Club Festival, yeah. Well, that was an interesting night out. We turned up there, and they said, can we use your PA? Because we thought there'd be a PA there, because it was like a festival thing. And we said, yeah, I suppose so. Otherwise, there won't be a gig. And so that kind of bumped us up to, going on last. And then they said, well, Chris Spedding turned up, and they'd been advertising his name on the bill. But I don't think anyone had actually spoken to him and said to him, are you going to do this? So he turned up and he said, well, I'm here. I'm prepared to go on, but I haven't got a band. And so they said to us, will you back Chris Spedding? So we said, yeah, okay. Chris Spedding, gosh, used to go and see him with Sparks. What was the band he called? Sharp.
Yeah, that's right, yes.
Snips on the vocals and that, and they were really good. And you think, God, he's a really brilliant guitar player. So we said, yeah, all right. So we sat in the dressing room or the office in the 100 Club, and we had to. He said he taught us how to play motorbiking and another song, and then said, "What rock and roll songs do you know?" And we said, "Well, how about this one, and this one?" I can't remember what we played now. It's Chuck Berry stuff and Little Richard stuff and Jerry Lee Lewis stuff, I imagine. So we did a bunch of that and filled in, so that we could do we did half an hour of our stuff and then half an hour with him, and it went down the storm. And then that's how he said, "Oh, I really like this band," and he went to Mickie Most and said, "Do you want to record them?"
Yes, and Mickie Most was the go-to producer at that time as well, wasn't he?
Yeah, well, he was the big noise producer at that time. Yeah, I mean, he something like 3 out of 5 records that he released, got into the top 20. So he was very successful.
I mean, I couldn't believe.
At the time, people said to he's a teeny bop producer and he's this, that, and the producer, and he's not that good. And I'm thinking, hang on a second, this is a guy that's done the Jeff Beck group. He's done all the Animals records. He's done Terry Reid, and all these artists that are just fantastic, and he's produced them. Why wouldn't you want to be produced by Mickie Most?
I couldn't believe, actually, because he died of asbestos, didn't he? Which apparently was what he constructed.
He had cancer. I didn't know that it was caused by asbestos.
And I think they related it back to when he did his studio and he kitted it out, and it was asbestos that he used. And it was like, oh, I think you probably got it from when you did your studio back in the 70s or something, which I remember thinking, that's horrendous, actually.
Yeah, he built RAK Studios, didn't he? It was up around Regent's Park, because we did some sessions there as well.
Right, yes. Because the thing, because I did an interview with Chris Spedding kind of recently, and I didn't realise how many records he had played in, including the Harry Nilsson, I Can't Live If Living Is Without You. And I said to him at the time, did you know when you were recording that was going to be quite such a classic? He said, you never know. You have no idea. The songs you think are going to be amazing aren't, and the ones that you think, that's all right, become the greatest songs of all time. But his CV is extraordinary. And then he went on to do an early production for the Sex Pistols as well, didn't he? So
yeah. I mean, he's a very talented guy. He's a lovely guy. And, that's how we came to work with him again. His record company wanted to put out a CD of all his early demos and stuff, record company in Germany. And so they dug out all the early demos and radio sessions and things that he'd done around that time, particularly the radio sessions. And they liked the one that we did with him best, because we did a John Peel session with him after we did, was it the Pogo Dancing?
Yes.
Single we did, and we did some stuff with him on that. And they said, how do you fancy doing some more recording with Chris Spedding? So we said, yeah. Love to, because, the guy is massively talented. He's a very nice bloke, and if he's up for it, we'd definitely be up for it. So we went in and we did 3 songs, and then they got cold feet, or they didn't have the money, or whatever. So in the meantime, Pat said, I've got downtime in the studio. Do you want to come in and we'll do a few more songs, and then put it back to Chris and see if he wants to come in and put some guitar on the top. So we did like the backing tracks and some vocals and stuff. Phoned him up and said, we've done, another, I can't remember how many more songs it was, it was probably about another 8 or 9 songs. Do you want to come and have a listen and see whether you want to, do some work on them? So he loved it and said, yes, great. So we went in and polished it all off, finished it all off with his help.
Amazing. That is incredible. And did you feel, because obviously at the time you're probably just thinking this is quite nice, things are going so well, the punk kind of moment that happened at the Roxy, did you suddenly all think, oh my God, we're punks? I didn't realise that. I thought we were just rock and roll. Was there a sort of, did you have that conversation?
I can't remember it. I think we always just thought, we're punks. That will do for us. It's interesting. It's good. We kind of slotted into that because we figured punk was like the new rock and roll. It was like the 70s rock and roll. We were trying to put some energy and some life back into the music scene because it had got pretty dire in the sort of 74, 75. You had all these things like Bohemian Rhapsody by Queen, and you kind of think, God, if that's the direction rock and roll's going in, I really don't want to know about this anymore. I thought it was quite absolutely the worst record I've ever heard in my life. That's dreadful, 8 minutes of absolute pretentious crap. So, for me it was like, let's go out and get back to that spirit that Little Richard and Chuck Berry had and all those kind of acts, and get a bit of energy and life back into it.
Yes, absolutely.
So, and at that time, people said, oh, it's punk. So, the Vibrators were punk, the Damned were punk, the Sex Pistols were punk, the Clash were punk, the Stranglers were punk, the Jam were punk. But all those bands had their own different characters and their own different style. It wasn't like a uniform that you put on and you had to play in a certain way. And I think, a few years later it did end up a bit more like that. You had to have the Mohican and all the rest of it.
Yeah. I think I did an interview with, I think it was a guy who was in a band called, is it Eater, who were a very young band from that period.
Yeah.
I can't remember his name. But I think he said that after a few years he looked at his audience and was like, oh no, I don't really want to do this anymore. Everyone wants to look like Sid Vicious, and it's like, this isn't kind of what I got into music, to just play.
Yeah, I never felt that. I loved all the kids that come to the gigs, if they got the red hair or all the gear, as long as they're just wearing whatever they want, that's cool. I never had a problem with that.
Yes.
That would have been, what's his name?
God, yeah, good point.
Chevron, his name, wasn't it?
Yeah. I just remember the woman who...
He did some stuff with him with the Vibes as well.
Yes. I just remember the woman who...
That's who it would have been.
Who is it?
Andy Blade.
That's the one. You've got it. God, this is like one of those pop quizzes with Mike Reid. I just remember the singer who guested with Terry Reid at the Glastonbury. It was Linda Lewis, who was amazing vocal. But in '77, which was obviously a fantastic year for our good Queen, you supported Iggy Pop at this stage. What was that tour like?
Oh, it was great. I really enjoyed it. It was a big bundle of fun. I mean, we got that because we'd been to Berlin and we'd been working out there, and they were playing our single on, We Vibrate on the German radio. And Iggy was out there rehearsing with David Bowie, and they heard it and thought, oh, that could be the right band for us to support. So, the guy that we got to produce our first album was doing our live sound, Robin Mayhew, and he used to be the sound man for David Bowie through that whole Ziggy Stardust period,
Yes.
All those gigs that they did. And so Robin... we had that connection with David Bowie, so when we turned up and said, oh, hello, this is our sound engineer, of course he goes, oh, bloody hell, it's Robin, So we got on very well with them. But for me, it was like, I spent the whole time watching the drummer thinking, God, I've got to get up my game and learn to play a lot better.
Was that Hunt Sales at the time?
Yeah, Hunt Sales, yeah.
Oh my God, that's amazing. Because, funny enough, so one thing that I'm very excited about, because I did an interview with dear old Robin last year, Robin Mayhew, who told me, how he got into being part of David Bowie's kind of being the sound man for the Ziggy Stardust tour, which was kind of, it went on for 2 years before it all went. But he was in a 60s band called The Presidents, wasn't he? And was kind of going kind of slightly nowhere fast, but started doing sound. And then Angie Bowie came up to him and tapped him on the shoulder and said, you've got a really good sound and David has got a terrible sound. Can you sort of sort it out for us? Because Angie seemed to be the mover and the groover from what he said. Well, that was his story, not Angie's. And he was 2 years doing that Ziggy Stardust, playing virtually every night for 2 years around the world, which was kind of amazing. Then I saw that he did your album, and he's such a nice guy.
Yeah, because our manager knew him from, tour managing and stuff. And he ran his PA company was called Ground Control,
Yes.
Ground Control to Major Tom.
So with that 77 tour, was David Bowie on keyboards? Was that the one that he
That's it, yeah.
My God. So it was quite... my God, you'd only been in the band for a year. Well, the band had only been going for a year. This must have felt like you were fast tracking to rock stardom with Iggy Pop, Hunt Sales and David Bowie.
Yeah, I mean, people say that. I mean, to us it was just, every day you were trying to get bigger and better and, do better shows. And every band in Britain at that time was trying to get on that tour. And we were just in the right place at the right time with the right connections, that our manager managed to sort it out. So it was very good.
Yes.
And there was a lot to learn, you could go and see that band and watch them from backstage every night and think, right, that's what we got. We sort of get up our game and get better and stuff. You know, like I say, I watched Sales and thought, wow, he's a much better drummer than me. I better start doing even more practice. But then, you know, I'd only been playing a year, so I wasn't doing bad.
Yes, I know from doing the interview, he said he was very influenced by jazz drummers in his youth, and he had a very famous father called Soapy Sells, who was one of those kind of comedians that he used to watch on telly, which was a bit weird, really, wasn't it? Sort of going, oh yeah, that's my dad. He's quite a famous kind of, you know, person, I suppose, in America at that stage in the 60s. So, yeah, blimey, that is quite something. So when you got the first album out, Pure Mania, were you pleased with it?
Yeah, at the time I thought it was great. It came out great. We did remix it for an American thing. I wasn't sure that was a better mix, but it was different. But yeah, I think afterwards we heard other records and thought, oh no, you know, we haven't done it as well as we wanted to, and we wanted to improve it. But at the time, the kind of ethos of going into that to make that album was to try and, you know, get an album with a lot of songs on it that were short, sharp, and had a very live sound, you know, like we were trying to recapture the sound that we had on stage. So a lot of it was done pretty much live in the studio with, you know, not too many overdubs, you know, guitar player, John playing the guitar solos, you know, as we put down the backing tracks. And I think we probably overdubbed the vocals and the backing vocals, but a lot of the rest of it was done bash in one, you know, bass, drums, guitars all at once.
Yes. Did it, because on the follow-up album, you'd worked with, obviously, Robin on that one, but you had Vic Mail, who went on to work with Motorhead at that stage, didn't he, on the first two albums? Yeah. I mean, what was Vic like to work on for the was it V2 album?
Yeah, well, he was a lot more meticulous, and I mean, we'd done gone for that live approach, so now we were trying to get a better studio sound, get better guitar sounds, better drum sounds, and try and, you know, get a more better production on it. So Vic Mail was the man to do it. I think he was a genius. He was a very, very clever guy. And I did quite a lot of work with him because I played with the Inmates for 15 years as well, and we did about 6 albums with Vic Mail.
Right.
I bagged in to do their first album as a session. Vic phoned me up and said, will you do this album for a band called the Inmates as a session for me? And I said, oh, yeah. And I kept in contact with them, and then the other drummer left. I had a couple of drummers, and they left, and they phoned me up and said, can you do a French tour for us next week? And I said, yeah, okay, and off we went. And I was in for 15 years after that. But Vic was very, very good, very meticulous. He would spend a lot more. We had more time and we had more budget, so we could spend more effort on that album. I mean, on the Troops of Tomorrow, we just did one whole day where we just sung the song to get that big, you know, football crowd kind of sound on the album.
Yes, amazing.
I that about 20 or 30 times that day.
It's such a shame in a way that Motorhead decided not to go with him on their third album and got Fast Eddie to do it, which kind of was the end of the band and various other reasons. But yeah, that was never good to have. Yes, it's good to have another person, but at the time, yes, these things happen. But then, did you find that because I mean, this is slightly simplistic, but you know, you had that punk period, and then after a few years, as you know, with any scene, you start to get sort of it loses its kind of fun bit. And after the V2 album, there was did you sort of have a little bit of a problem of what to do next? You know, as we trundled towards the late 70s.
Yeah, I don't know. I didn't, but I think other people in the band did. John wanted to do different things, and you know, Pat had left by that time because he was trying to do something different, and it was very, very difficult to replace Pat and John. We managed to replace Pat with Gary Tibbs, and he did extremely well. He was great. But then when it came to replacing John, it was very difficult because he's got such a unique style. And we auditioned hundreds of guitar players, and we ended up with Dave Birch, who did a really, really good job. But it still wasn't, you know, it didn't have the kind of zest that we really wanted. And then Knox wanted to go solo, and it all sort of crumbled and fell apart over a period of a couple of years. We had line-up changes, and it just didn't all gel as well as it should have done. But you know, that's what you have to do in bands.
Yes.
We got back together in, 82, and it was Pat and John was sitting in a pub getting drunk, and they said, let's reform the band. And they phoned me up and said, I said, yeah, I'll do it. I'm doing other things at the moment, but yeah, I can find time for that. And Knox said the same, and then since then we've been going pretty well without a break since then.
Yeah. So this is, I mean, with the 80s, as it sort of progressed, you had that post-punk period, and there had been sort of like the goth scene and psychobilly, and then there was anarcho-punk, and then kind of indie pop started in 83, really, with, the Smiths, which were 5 years. Did you find... and there was all the new romantic stuff, and at that time, Trevor Horn production sound, Frankie Goes to Hollywood and ABC, and then sort of Duran Duran and Dire Straits. So did you sort of find it, trying to find your sort of footing in the 80s, was that quite tricky for the band?
We just did our own thing, it was obvious, when you're on an independent label, you're not going to get into the big time. We never really got the radio play that the Vibrators deserved, probably because of the name of the band. I mean, we did a thing somewhere in America last year, or, on the last tour, and the guy saying, oh, we can't really say the Vibrators on radio. I was going, what the hell are you talking about, You're bonkers, it's absolutely nothing bad about it at all. Music is, a vibration. But anyway, we never got the radio play that we did, but, we sold out all the shows everywhere we played, and we were busy, and we were selling, enough records to keep making the next one, so we just kept going and going out playing live. It was good fun. Everyone was enjoying it. And, as far as me and Knox was concerned, we just keep the ball rolling,
Yes, absolutely. I mean, with this lineup, was it Mark Duncan on bass as well, and Mickey Owen on vocals and guitar? Because his vocals are quite Lou Reed-esque, aren't they? Probably everyone says that.
Knox's are, I think, more than Mickey's. Yeah.
Right. It was Knox, was it?
Yeah. Knox sounds a bit more Lou Reedy sometimes, and we have to try and avoid doing that. We always used to try and make sure that we didn't sound too much like Lou Reed.
Yes.
He was very acutely aware of that. But Mickey was always a little bit more sort of like Ronnie Wood or Ron Lane or something. He was a big Faces fan like I was, so that was always where Mickey was coming from.
Yeah.
I spoke to Mickey the other day. But I think his guitar playing was really good, and we had a different style in the band there. But, whoever you bring into the band brings their own style of playing, and the band has to sort of change a little bit to accommodate them. You can't get anybody who is exactly like John Ellis or Pat Collier or whatever, or Gary Tibbs. They all sound slightly different, so the band does change its sound slightly, and you have to accommodate these people if you want them in the band.
Yes.
He probably would still be playing us now, but he moved down to Bristol, and it just became impractical to, try and run a band with people living hundreds of miles apart.
Yes, and obviously this was a sort of a completely amazing sort of second run for the band, because you record like 4 albums in 4 years, which is always a good sort of time, and also playing live a lot. So did it sort of feel like you'd got a good energy with the lineup at this stage?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah, it was all good. We were just going out playing. All the shows were really busy. We played all over Europe. We didn't get into America until the end of that kind of lineup, and that was very tough. And that's probably what would cause people to start to think, "Oh my God, I can't do too many American tours." But because that is mega hard work than going to America.
Yes. Well, it's interesting because most bands I've found, have this 5-year narrative, especially from the 80s, they get together, they have 12 months, kind of honeymoon period. They get a single, John Peel plays it. They get the John Peel session, with Del Griffith from, Mott the Hoople producing it, and they have quite a good time. And then the first album's great, and the second album's not too bad. The third album, they're really starting to struggle. But what's really interesting is that mostly they often say, we went to America, we came back and we broke up, because America just sounds like a really tough gig, and it sounds like you'd also experienced some of that as well.
Yeah, people always say to me, if you're going to be in a band, you want to go and play in America, you want to go and see the world. I mean, I've just been doing things the other day, and I worked out we played in 38 different countries throughout the world, which is not bad for a little band.
Yes, but, absolutely.
Much radio play. We've been all over the world. We've done Moscow and and all these kind of places, Australia, New Zealand, America. But America's a big country. I mean, it's what is it? It's about, from here to Berlin's about 1,000 miles, and America's 3,000 miles across.
Yes,
So when you start going from west to east or east to west, you've got a 6 or 8 hour journey every day. And then you've got to do a gig on the back of it. If you had too many days off, you don't make any money.
Yeah, I know, because a lot of people in the European world, especially with the political stuff, it was like doing 30 days in 30 gigs in 30 days in Europe, and sort of because you've got Van, PA, various other members that you've not in the band that you're going to be paying, so you don't really want sort of swanning around for 2 or 3 days here and there because you're thinking that's the profit going, so I think most bands get quite wise to that, but with age it also gets a bit harder because you that's quite a heavy one. With America, did you ever play Las Vegas, do the bowling and punk kind of weekends?
No, we never did the punk rock bowling thing. No, we have played Las Vegas a number of times, probably about 15, 20 times or something.
Yes.
We play a couple of different bars there. We played 2, 3, 4, about 5 or 6 different bars there.
And do you sort of find that with the band that you're still always getting a young audience who sort of have kind of come across you on Spotify?
Oh, yeah. I mean, they come across, they get bored with what's on the radio. They don't want to listen to all the sort of, regular stuff that's on the radio, all the sort of, take that and all that kind of stuff. They want to get into something that's a bit dangerous, a bit energetic and a bit lively and a bit, more, rock and roll. And so there's always going to be young kids that want to go down and listen to that kind of music.
Yes.
So the gigs towards the end of our career, you've got, 20-year-olds and 60-year-olds. So, whereas, in the 70s, everyone was 20 years old.
I know.
30 years old, like Knox was 30 and he was too old.
Well, Richard Strange said, when they were about 75, that they, he was 2 years too early for punk because he was, thinking, we've been doing this for too long. But all the audience were sort of young and they all, sweeping statement, but, were the ones who formed punk bands and they felt like they'd slightly missed the boat. It's all about timing, though, in music, isn't it? Timing is everything.
Yeah, I think that could be right. I mean, I think, looking back on it now, we were at the right place at the right time when we put our little band together and we just went for it. At the time, we did everything we could to try and, get as many shows as we could, play wherever we could and do as much work as we could, We did all sorts of things like going around painting our name on the floor outside the, Radio 1 and everything so that every DJ that walked in saw our name and, crazy stunts that we did. It was good fun.
Yes.
We really went for it, I remember they phoned us up and said, we need a soul band for the night. And we said, okay, and we turned up and we stuck Knock on Wood or something in the set and just did the regular set and put Knock on Wood in. That's a sort of soul song, isn't it?
Excellent. So 2 years ago, you brought out an album on Cleopatra Records, Mars Casino, which is the kind of the original lineup, isn't it?
Yeah, that was the one we did with Spedding. That's when we got back and, with the record company saying, let's do an album with Spedding. And we, like I say, we did it all and then got Spedding in at the end. And it came out really good. Knox had some good songs for it and John had good songs. It all came very well, I mean, Pat is, an excellent producer. He's right up there with the Vic Mayalls of the world when it comes to his producing. He likes doing this kind of style of music, so it works very well.
Yes, amazing. And then dear old Cherry Red Records, who are always good sort of for their compilations and collections and box sets and fantastic sleeve notes, have brought together this latest one, which is your sort of the last half of the 80s. So you must, when did this start to get mentioned and decided to do it?
Well, they just phoned us up and said, do you want to, what's his name?
Ian.
No, not Ian. The guy that used to run Captain Oi.
Oh, I can't remember Captain Oi.
Oh, he'll kill me if I forget his name.
Yes.
Yeah, I'm very bad with names. He said, do you want to do this? No, not Darren Russell. That's the guy that books what's in it. Oh, God.
I'm just thinking of another guy called Gary Bushell.
He phoned us up and said, do you want to, sell all these albums? They're all sitting around waiting, and Cherry Red want to buy them. So he went through and found everything that we had and put it to Cherry Red. And we said, yeah, let's do it. And some money in the bank and for our pension sort of thing.
Absolutely. Now, were these all on just one label, like Revolver Records, or were they on different labels?
Yeah, they were mainly on Revolver, I think, at that time, weren't they? Yeah, and I think it was Revolver we got involved in. It was a friend of a friend that was setting up a record label. We wanted to do it, so he signed us to do that. But they obviously went out of bust, and those records were unavailable for quite a long time.
Yes, absolutely. So was this kind of one of those projects that started at the beginning of lockdown or 2 years ago?
What we did in lockdown, this was fairly recent. This came up about a year ago, but we did in lockdown. We were bored, and so Cleopatra in America said, "Do you want to do one final album? We'll give you a bit more money for it." And so we said, "Yeah, okay." But they said, "It's got to be the last album." We thought, well, we're not going to do too many more albums after this anyway. So we took the money and we went in, and so we've got another album coming out in May of this year, in the end of April, May this year. It's stuck in the queue waiting for all the vinyl to be pressed up, apparently.
Yes, probably behind Adele.
And that'll be called Mars Casino, and that's with Pete on bass and Nigel on guitar and Knox and myself.
Mars Casino, blimey, there's a busy schedule, actually. So the project coordinator on this is Mark Brennan.
Yeah, Mark Brennan, yeah.
He's your man, actually.
He did that whole repackaging of the Revolver stuff for Cherry Red.
Yes.
Yeah. What did I say? The new album's called Fall Into the Sky. But after lockdown, Nigel went back to Australia, and a lot of his family are out in Australia, so he's gone to live in Adelaide and be with his daughter and his mother and his brother and stuff. And Pete went back to Finland, so it just became impossible to try and do little shows around and things. You can't fly people in from Australia to do shows. It's just not a possibility.
It's not going to happen.
So we had a couple of shows left, so we thought we'd do a couple of shows with the original lineup. So that's next weekend.
Blimey, that's amazing. So who's on the lineup of the next, or the album that's going to come out in May or June?
Yeah, that's me and Knox, and then Nigel on guitar, Nigel Bennett on guitar, and Pete on bass.
And that's it, really. So do you? If this goes successfully, would there be a possibility of still recording another album, but sort of, doing it all from sort of remote places?
There's always that possibility, but if it goes to number one and sells 1 million copies, they'll probably be asking us to do it, and then we might have to go back in the studio. But we'll wait until we'll see. We're getting a bit old.
Yes, this is true. You might have to go and sort of step in at Caesar's Palace in Vegas and take over a few nights from Adele as she sort of recovers.
Las Vegas is probably about my least favourite town in the whole world.
Oh, was it?
Yeah. It just doesn't appeal to me with that whole gambling and pornography and stuff. It's just not my cup of tea. I don't know. There's a lot of good punk kids there that come to the shows and stuff, but compared to other places, it's not my thing.
Yes.
Stinking hot. It's in the middle of the desert. Wherever you come from, it takes about 6 hours to drive there.
I know it's not an easy place to go to. With the band, two things. Have you managed to sort of keep kind of ownership and track of all the records and that you've done and both studio and live albums? Because you've got a phenomenal discography here.
Yeah, pretty much. I think I remember them all. When I was sorting this stuff out with Cherry Red, I had to get all the contracts out, and it's a pile of papers about 2 foot high. There's a lot of stuff there, but
yes.
I think it's all in my brain, most of it, because reading through them all takes forever. So, but yeah, it's all pretty good.
Oh, that's fantastic. When you look at the band over the decades. Oh, sorry. I said, when you look back at the band over the decades, is there any particular period or particular album that you have fondest memories of?
Yeah, it's usually the ones you're making at the moment. You kind of think, that came out really well. I did like V2. I thought that came out really, really good. I thought it was a big improvement on Pure Mania, sound-wise and song-wise. We probably, if Pat had still been in the band and we'd had 1 or 2 of his songs on it, it might have been a bit better. So that was always a favourite of mine, and the first one we did with Mickie and Mark, I think that came out, Recharge, that came out really well as well.
Yes, I did think. I did really like. Oh God, no, I can't remember which one it was. Actually, I was playing a lot of today, and I suppose actually I did love the vocals, and it was Recharge, which has the opening song of "String 'Em Along." I think it's because it just has that. I mean, I have to say it does remind me a bit of Lou Reed, which you probably hear.
Oh yeah. That's what I'm thinking. It is a bit Lou. We always tried to make sure it wasn't too Lou Reedy.
Yes, I mean at that stage, were you kind of influence, or because it was kind of a weird period during the 80s. I mean, I suppose every decade is, but during that kind of the late 80s, there was, I suppose, the ecstasy world came along, and there was that sort of dance scene which had people like the Happy Mondays and Primal Scream, and sort of and then you had those American noise bands like Sonic Youth and Big Black and the Butthole Surfers. I just wondered what you were listening to at that point, or had you just sort of stayed with what you're, as Lemmy?
Yeah, I stayed with what I was doing. There came up occasionally bands like that you go and see and you think, wow, they're really, really good. I remember seeing the Wonder stuff and thinking, God, I hope somebody signs them, they're going to be big. But basically, we were working pretty hard at that time. We were doing a lot of gigs, touring a great deal. And it was towards the end of that I started working a lot with the Inmates as well. So I was doing sort of 120 gigs and 2 or 3 European tours every year. So
yes,
I was pretty busy.
You were very busy, actually.
A lot of those bands, like when you were younger, you had plenty of time and you go and see all those bands. But when you're playing a lot, you don't have the chance.
Yeah,
missing things that you really wished you'd seen.
This is true. And how do you cope or have coped? I suppose physically, with sort of being the drummer, because I know I did an interview with the Blue Screaming Blue Messiahs, and the drummer was like, was kind of a bit hobbly at times and a bit sort of because of his drumming. Did you, has it had much of an effect on your health?
No, I think I read an article once that said that drummers should live older than people because you have to do like 4-way coordination with. So you have to get both your legs and your arms working separately and independently of each other. And then if you're singing, then it's kind of almost like 5-way coordination. So that keeps your brain active. And, of course, it's physical and, you've got to stay fairly fit to do it. And like I say, I've always played sports and stuff. I've always played cricket all through the summer. And, I've never been one I've never smoked. I kind of quit drinking almost. Well, I don't quit drinking, but I cut back on the drinking massively just before the band started because I thought I won't live just be 27 if I don't stop. And so I've always kind of been healthy, and to me, just going out and playing and keeping strong, fit and healthy, it's good fun. So you don't want to spoil it by being sick and ill and getting tired. But I know a lot of drummers got worn out. I'm surprised Kenny was like that, but he's a very good drummer as well. I used to like the Screaming Blue Messiahs. I drove them around a few times.
Yes, I think they did have a bit of a rock and roll lifestyle, which also didn't help really. So
yeah, they did have a bit of that rock and roll lifestyle. And when I was driving them around, they're kind of surprised that I don't smoke and didn't drink much and didn't want to go out and party. I said, well, I'm driving tomorrow. I can't do that.
And the Inmates, were you in the band for most of that time, or did you say you were?
I did the first album as a session. Big Mail phoned me up to do that as a session, but we were doing the Vibrators at the time, and it didn't dawn on me that I could possibly be in 2 bands. But I kept in touch with them and did odd things. I did a couple of gigs with them around that time. I did a party for Stiff Records once, and with Madness. Madness got signed the next week and went on to become Mega.
Yes, they did become Mega.
Yeah, and so I always kept in touch with Ben and Tony and that. And like I say, they did a couple of albums with Jim Russell that were really good. And then they got another drummer in, and I think he pulled out to do a tour with Bananarama or someone. And they phoned me up and said, "Oh, can you do a tour of France with us in a fortnight?" And I said, "Yeah, of course I can."
Yes, Bananarama was always going to get that gig because they got signed. I mean, you were on Epic Records, weren't you, for the first two albums?
Yeah.
And was that a good sort of relationship? Did that sort of?
Yeah, I thought we did really well with them. It was a shame that it all fell through. That people kept leaving the band, and then they lost faith in us because we kept changing lineups and it wasn't working very well with the last lineup that we had, and then Knox said, maybe I should do a solo album, and that was that. It was the plug was pulled, and that was the way. But they were pretty good. I liked them. We used to go in and see them, and they'd phone you up and can you come in and do this and that, and I was always up for doing it. Other people didn't want to sometimes, but I don't mind.
Yeah. Because I think just before Christmas, I think it was the drummer with the Searchers who started in the sort of like 62 or 63. I mean, he's still sort of doing it, and he's the one who sort of kept the baton of the band going. Do you sort of feel that kind of, that you've kept the sort of the flame of the Vibrators going?
Yeah, I think so. I think with Knox as well. I mean, you've got to give him credit. I mean, he couldn't do any more touring when he got to about 65, and he just said, I can't. And he was like, suffering with his health a little bit. But I'd like to say I've always been, the one for doing exercise, going swimming and stuff, and keeping fit and healthy. So I was able to keep it going. And what it was we had a festival to do up in the north of Norway, in Tromsø, above the Arctic Circle, with the midnight sun and everything. And all the tickets, everything was paid. And Knox said, I just don't think I can do it. So I said to Pete and Nigel, Pete, you can sing. You'll have to do all the lead vocals. And so he said, I can't learn all the songs in a fortnight. I said, well, all right, I'll do some of them. And then Nigel said, I'll do what I can. So me and Pete did most of the vocals, and we thought, hang on, this works. We can get away with this. It's very good. So we just kept the ball rolling, and then, we wanted to keep Knox involved in it because of the songwriting and the singing and his guitar playing. So he kind of became a Brian Wilson figure that came in to help out when we were doing the albums, to make the album stronger.
Yes, which is always useful.
This works really. It makes it a lot easier if you get on and because you're spending hours in hotel rooms and vans and what have you together. So it worked very well. Pete was an excellent singer and bass player, so it was no problem.
Yeah, and did being on the road suit your lifestyle and your personality?
Yeah, I loved it. Yeah, I like being on the road. You go around the world, you tour, you see different countries. Like I say, we've been all over the world, and you just have to take the rough with the smooth, don't you? You have hard days where you've got an 8-hour drive and you've got to get up at 6 o'clock in the morning and get a plane and all the rest of it. But at the end of the day, you do a show, the people enjoy it, you sell out crowd, you have a nice dinner, and you talk to people and you meet people that you'd never meet in a million years. And they're really pleased to see that you've made the effort to get there and go and play for them. So that's very cool. I love every moment of it.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it is amazing with the band because you've all done so many things with other people, haven't you? You've like that Pete Frame family tree. There's, with Tibbs did stuff with Hazel O'Connor on Breaking Glass,
music
and Adamant and people like that. So it's it's quite a fascinating story, really. Each band has such kind of like. Goes out in like I don't know, the roots of a tree, I guess.
There's only so many people out there playing, and you've got to try and get people in the band that you trust and that you can get on with. So you tend to go for people that you know rather than a total stranger.
Yes.
If you go with a total stranger, you might find that he's a heroin addict or something on the quiet, and you don't realise it, and then suddenly you're on tour and it's a nightmare.
Yes, that would be rather tedious. I mean, have you managed to archive your kind of career in the sense of sort of keeping lots of posters or notes or diaries or?
Yeah, I'm thanks for that. Yeah, I've been sort of giving stuff away to museums and stuff lately. People keep phoning me up and saying, "Have you got something?" So I've been sending stuff out to the Paraguay Punk Rock Museum, and there's a punk rock museum in Las Vegas that's got a bunch of stuff, and I just sent another load of stuff out to some archive in Germany about our time in Germany in '77. That went in the post yesterday. So, but I've still got a lot of stuff, but I'm sort of getting rid of all the doubles and things and trying to keep one of everything instead of 5.
That was very good to be such a womble when you were in the band, and
well, I took all the posters up and framed up on all around the house and all the pictures and all the rest of it. But I mean, our manager was going to throw it all away when the band, and I said, no, stick it in the lock-up, we'll keep it. So a lot of it's been stashed in the back of the lock-up for years and years and years. And it's only because of this lockdown that I had to clear it all out and hang on, let's see what we've got in here.
Excellent. God, that must have been fantastic, actually. Yeah. I do love those kind of... I've been to a few of those exhibitions where you just see material. Okay, it was David Bowie's, but at the V&A, but it was very good. So, have you ever been tempted then, because I've noticed this recently, there's been a lot of books coming out in the last 5 years of people's, either, a lot of photographic books or a bit of a story of what they've done just to archive it again. Have you sort of thought, this could be...
I have thought of it. I've done about 80 pages of a book, and then I sort of stopped, and then when I've finished with these last few gigs and bits and bobs, and I got a bit more time on my hand. The trouble is I'm hopeless at all this computer stuff, so it's all written in pencil in books.
Yes.
I'll get around to finishing it all up, and everywhere I live, in Brightlingsea, everyone keeps saying, "Oh, you got to do a book. You got to do a book. You got all these great stories." So maybe I will. Yeah, maybe I'll get it out. But I just think nobody will want to read it. But probably some people will.
Yes, they do. I do. I love those. I mean, even Robin's got a little book out that I got, when he sent me his kind of book and a few... funny enough, he sent me a few CDs that the CD of the Ziggy Stardust night from the mixing board, the fallen of Ziggy Stardust, and it was just so sweet, so I'm so pleased.
Trying to get Baby Baby played by Johnny Walker on his 70s show, and I think he sent him some... live stuff from Ziggy Stardust tours, in the 70s, and said, I'll give you this if you play Baby Baby, but he still hasn't played Baby Baby on the Johnny Walker show, so never mind. I saw him, he lives down in Bognor Regis, and we played down there, and he came up and said, "Hello, do you remember me?" Okay. Yeah, Robin. Oh my God, yeah. I hadn't seen him since, 77. That was about 5 years ago, so that was quite fun.
God, he must have been amazed. Yes.
Yeah, he's a lovely bloke. Yeah, got on very well with him. I was sitting there chatting away for hours before the gig, so it was good.
Yeah, fantastic. And you met David Bowie and Iggy Pop, which were quite incredible. Yes, it was good. I mean, if there was one little thing you could have, or two things you could have said to your 16 or 18-year-old self starting out, is there any sort of words of wisdom that you might have just sort of wanted to tell them, even if they ignored you?
I would just say, just go for it 100%. You can't go into these things and do it half-heartedly. You have to give it absolutely everything that you possibly can. You can't have a day off, and think that, someone else will do it for you. You have to do it all yourself, and you have to really put your heart and soul into it. But it's like that in any business, whether you're a builder or a cook or whatever, I mean, my mother always used to say to me, the more you put into something, the more you get out of it. And I think that's absolutely true. So you just got to go for it and do the best you can.
Yes.
It means that sometimes your family get put on hold, and you get all that rubbish going on in your life, divorce and all the rest of it. But, for me, you keep the band going, and that's paying the rent, and that's what I wanted to do. So I've always done it, Just go for it flat out. I wanted to go out and play and be in the bands and tour the world, and I've done pretty good at it, to be honest.
Well, absolutely. And were your parents, did they get to sort of see your career take off?
Yeah, they did and they didn't. I mean, I don't think my father was terribly happy about it all, because I had a proper job before that, and I dumped that in, and I couldn't wait to get out of there. It was a waste of time. I worked for Marconi Space and Defence Systems, and that was... couldn't wait to get out of there. And then, he kind of maybe grudgingly, saw the band take off and then sort of, fold up and all the rest of it. But I played with a little jazz combo with a girl called Sylvia Griffin in the 80s as well. I was doing that on the side, and with a piano and a double bass. And we played Ronnie Scott's, and so my parents came down and see me at Ronnie Scott's, and they thought, that's okay, he's good stuff. All the kind of music that he liked. But I'm doing that again now in Brightlingsea. I'm playing on a little jazz blues combo called Vic and the Vibrators, and we got this girl singer, and she was just like the barmaid in the local pub, and she turned up, and we were having a rehearsal, and we thought, well, she says she can sing a bit, so, yeah, bring her down, maybe she can sing one or two songs. And she walks in and starts singing, and it's like, oh my God, Janis Joplin's just walked in the room,
Oh, excellent.
So, yeah, it's fantastic. One of the best singers I've ever worked with. And of course, she doesn't even know it, but she'll find out one day, I expect.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it?
I'm playing a couple of bands down here. I've got another band with some friends called EEM, and it's all just, that's our initials, EEEM. And that's good fun, We go out and just do our little shows around here locally, and all our mates come, and it's great fun. It's good fun.
Yes, well, you've got to keep on doing it because, yes, look at the Rolling Stones. I mean, they've just been amazing. Their last kind of 6 months, they've just done that massive tour, and yeah, it's been brilliant to see them do it. And even if they, they
should have phoned me up instead of Steve Jordan, I'd have done it.
That would have been quite nice, wouldn't it? Really?
Yeah.
Yes.
That's one of the things they said to me when I did the first Inmates album. I said, how do you want this song to sound? How do you want me to play the drums on this? They said, just try and be like Charlie Watts. I said, oh, well, that should have been too hard. I can do that.
Excellent. Yes, nice one. Well, look, this has been fantastic. Thank you ever so much, Eddie, for for your time. And I'll send this to the guys at Cherry Red Records who sort of fixed it up. But it's been great listening to your latter 80s work. So yes, thank you ever so much.
I've been listening to it for a week as well, and I thought, God, these sounds are really good, aren't they?
Yes, I know. There's I think
covers. Like Slow Death and stuff. Wow, what a fantastic song. And, it's only been covered by 2 or 3 other people.
I know, it's funny, isn't it? I've sort of discovered more things from that decade, roughly, and sort of either side of it, that I missed the first time, which is kind of... Because at the time, you can't always listen to stuff because you didn't have streaming, you didn't have computers, you had to go and buy it or listen to it on the radio, and if you bought it, it was like $3-4.99, which is sometimes you thought, I don't know. It was, you only had so much money, didn't you? So
yeah. Well, I just bought records. I've got hundreds of them upstairs. I don't know how many albums I've got. Several hundred, I think.
Yes.
So, I haven't streamed anything. I don't know how you do any of that. I'm hopeless at it. I can't bear it. I think I'm really happy that vinyl's coming back into fashion and people are going out and buying it. It's the real thing,
I think so. Yes, I know. I'd sort of holding a copy of an album. The smell.
The band, you're giving money to that band and keeping them going and keeping the whole scene alive. It's very important.
I know.
I hate to be starting out now. It must be terrifically difficult, but you have to go about it in a completely different manner. But then you could end up like a Bell, where you go from nothing to mega, and then you can't really cope with it. So, anyway.
I know they need to be sort of out there 4 in the morning unloading their gear in 3 flights of steps from a transit van. That's
Hammond organ.
It's quite tricky, isn't it? That's especially in the middle of winter. You just think, you really need to be into it, don't you?
You've got to want to do it.
You got to do it. But look, this has been amazing. Thank you ever so much for your time. And look. Have a great evening.
Catch up with you another day. Yeah, let us know, and I'll speak to the guys at Cherry Red and tell them it's all been good.
It's all been good.
Excellent.
Thanks a lot. Take care and have a lovely evening.
Bye
bye.
You very much.
Cheers.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. And that was me in conversation with Eddie from the Vibrators, Eddie Edwards, or John Eddie Edwards. Anyway, look, massive thank you for giving me the time for that. And as we were talking about the Vibrators, the albums, the box set came out, or is coming out this month, which is 1985 to 1995 CDs with lots of bonus stuff. So do check it out, buy it. It will change your life, and they've got a new album out as well. If you want to contact me, I know, so exciting. You can on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Just do C86 Show. Keep it positive, please. God, I can't cope with any negative vibes. And yes, all these have been archived. You can find those on Spotify. I know. iTunes, Podbean. Just go for C86 Show. It's all good. Take care. Have a great week.